Okay. Do we have any other board directors on?
Is the presentation up? Can you see it?
This is Director Hersey. I can see the presentation.
Thank you, Director Hersey.
Is it being shared on Teams?
There is a PowerPoint available through Teams. It's just our standard board meeting presentation, which has content that is consistent with the board meeting agenda.
Do we have any other directors on the call?
Hello? Director,
Sounds like Director Mack.
can you hear me, Zach? It's Director Rankin.
Can somebody let me know
Hi,
if we're
Rankin.
starting?
We are trying to, but I don't have quorum just yet.
Director,
Director Mack is here too, and Director DeWolf, I don't know if you can see that you can see the list of people on the call. There's a little button for that.
and Director Harris is here.
Are you talking about in Teams?
Yes.
President
Ellie.
DeWolf, do you know that I'm here?
A couple updates. We will not be using the chat feature in Teams, so please make sure to not utilize the chat feature in Teams. Also, please turn off your cameras if you have a camera on your computer and you're accessing through Teams. Finally, we are streaming this through SBS TV, and my understanding is that the audio is currently live on the television.
Hi, SBS TV.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a quorum. I'd love to get this meeting started. We are at 1:02 p.m. So it is 1:02 p.m. I am now calling the March 25th, 2020 regular board meeting to order. We live and go to school in a city that is the ancestral homeland to the Duwamish people, Muckleshoot Nation, and the Suquamish Nation. We acknowledge them as custodians of this land since time immemorial. As guests, and in many of our cases as settlers on this land, we extend our deepest gratitude and respect to their ancestors and elders past, present, and future. Ms. Wilson-Jones, I'm going to ask you to call the roll call, please, and if you are not talking, please mute your phone. Thank you, and take it away, Ms. Wilson-Jones.
Director Hampson? Director Hampson? If you are muted currently, we cannot hear you. Director Hampson?
Go ahead and keep going.
Director Harris?
Here.
Thank you.
Director Hersey?
Here.
Thank you.
Director Mack?
Here.
Director Rankin?
I'm here, and I'm on a phone, and I'm about to switch to a laptop. I'm here.
Okay.
Director
you.
Rivera
I'm
Smith?
just getting back from delivering lunches.
Director Rivera Smith is here.
Thank you.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Director Hampson?
Yes, here. Sorry.
Director DeWolf?
Thank you. Here. Okay, thank you, everybody. So Superintendent Juneau is also joining us for today's meeting, and additional staff will be briefing the board as we move through this agenda. Obviously, today is our first day doing our regular legislative board meeting by telephone. So thanks everybody for your patience and your flexibility as we get into this practice. So just to reiterate, this meeting is being held electronically, consistent with the governor's March 24th, 2020 proclamation prohibiting meetings such as this one from being held in person. And I'll note that members of the public may also be joining via phone or online streaming. I will not be asking members of the public to identify themselves, but thank you to those of you who are joining us today. As stated on the agenda, there will not be a public comment opportunity today per the board's March 11th, 2020 vote to waive relevant provisions of Board Policy 1430 and Board Procedure 1430BP and Board Resolution 2019/20-29, suspending board policies to facilitate implementation of emergency measures in response to the novel coronavirus or COVID-19. Public comments are always invited via email to the board, by fax, and by mail as stated on the agenda. To facilitate today's meeting, I will be asking participants to ensure that you are muted when you are not speaking. Staff may also be muting participants to address feedback and ensure we can hear directors and staff. So let's see where we are. Okay, so we have now reached the consent portion of today's agenda. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda? And before we actually, let me pause really quick. I do want to note that we have removed the March 7th retreat minutes off of today's agenda, and they have been moved to the April 7th regular legislative board meeting. So those are not currently on today's agenda anymore. They will be up for our consideration on the April 7th meeting. So I just wanted to clarify. So knowing all that, we have now reached the consent portion of today's agenda. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda. This is Director Hampson.
Thank you, Director Hampson.
Director
Do I have a second?
Harris.
Thank you, Director Harris, for the second. Approval of the consent agenda has been moved by Director Hampson and seconded by Director Harris. Do directors have any items they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none. Seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. The consent agenda has passed unanimously. So we will now move to the introduction portion of the agenda. I will note that, as indicated on the agenda, many of today's introduction items were not first reviewed in committee due to public health-related cancellations of several of our March committee meetings. So to facilitate director questions and discussions today, I'll be calling on each director alphabetically after each staff presentation, and just go through names alphabetically to gather questions, comments, concerns. So we will now move to introduction item number 1. And this is approval of Families Education Preschool and Promise FEP levy funding for K-12 school-based investments for the 2020, 2021 through 2025, 2026 school years. So Senior Advisor to the Superintendent Sherry Cox, I believe you will be briefing us on this and our next item. So I'll let you take it away.
Yes, thank you, directors and President DeWolf. I'd first like to just start off this agenda item by thanking the district staff and the City of Seattle staff who have worked hard through this process of the Family Education Preschool and Promise school-based investments. I'd also like to thank the Seattle voters for continuing to have faith in our work together as systems. The city has awarded 20 elementary schools, 5 middle schools, and 5 high schools, although these have not been publicly announced due to the coronavirus incident. These investments will support our schools and target investments on students who need these supports the most, our students who are furthest from educational justice. SPS, Seattle Public Schools, values the partnership we've had with the City of Seattle and particularly the Department of Education and Early Learning. And we appreciate you, board directors, for your ongoing engagement around FEP's school-based investments. Last year, the school board, Superintendent Juneau, Mayor Durkin, and the City Council signed our partnership agreement that guides this work and this relationship and the implementation of FEP. I just want to call the attention that this is a 6-year We've put forward the bar for 6 years with a $113,572,311 grant to support a variety of work that will be taking place over the next 6 years. On the third page of the bar itself, it goes into what the K-12 investments are paying for. And I just want to highlight a couple of them that are in direct alignment with our strategic plan. The culturally responsive programming, that is our Kingmakers programs that are happening at some of our schools throughout the city. And then the Educator Diversity Award is for our Academy Rising Educators, our Seattle Teacher Residency, and our Class to Cert programs, just to name a few of what those investments are being utilized for. You can see in the third bullet on page 3, the K-12 investments, including expanded learning and academic supports, as well as college readiness. And I'm not going to read each of the schools to you, but they are listed there. This award also includes our nursing programming, as well as wraparound services for family support services. And those family support services would include a total of 3 FTE, 1 at Martin Luther King Elementary, 1 at Dearborn International, and 1 at Concord International Schools. And then there is also the summer learning at the schools listed there. One last thing that I'd like to just call out on, a couple of things actually, is that both SPS and DEAL are committed to utilizing racial equity analysis. That's been used throughout the process, and we're both committed to continuing to utilize these strategies in the decision-making process as this work is ongoing over the next 6 years. The benefit to our students is quite phenomenal there. While that section of the bar is short in itself, but this goes further our practices of culturally responsive teaching, supports both students' physical and mental health programming in grades K through 12, as well as other academic learning, so that we can ensure that our scholars are college and community ready, because as you know, the other part of the FEP is the post-secondary education. I will conclude my comments at this time. I do want to call out that Dwayne Chappelle from DEAL is here as well, and he and I are ready for questions.
Thank you, Sherry. So at this point, I'm going to call on directors in alphabetical order and just ask if you have questions or provide any comments on item number 1. And just a reminder, again, today, all of our items are introduction. And we have 11 items today. We are scheduled to be here until 3. So knowing all that, I'm going to start with Director Hampson and go down the list. So Director Hampson, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns for Sherry and item number 1?
I just want to say I'm grateful for the historic partnership, particularly this round of funding has been much, there's been quite a bit more engagement that I've witnessed with respect to community partner outreach. And so I think that DEAL has been heading in a good direction with that in terms of their partnership with us and with other community-based partners. It's been heartening to watch. I do think that in terms of things that we're going to want to, in the implementation, that we'll want to pay attention to, that we do have, that DEAL did a great job tracking the schools that were invited to participate, the schools that then did or did not choose to participate. I think we're going to need to have some conversations internally to SPS as to the extent to which we're providing all the appropriate support to make sure that the principals have what they weight does fall to them and their BLTs. But I think that there was a tremendous amount of effort, probably more effort than has ever been done before, to make sure that we knew kind of the targeted, the schools that were invited to participate and apply, and then that DEAL was able to follow all the way through and connect with folks and kind of learn where they were in the process. And then I know there's also going to be some juggling of who those partners are in our local school communities. And I hope that and when all of this is said and done, I think we'll probably have some even closer, stronger partnerships that will ensure that what comes into buildings, given that we've had some negative partner experiences in our past, that we'll try to make sure that all of these localized school partnerships get off on a great track. And I'm really excited about a lot of the new schools coming in, and also very committed to supporting the schools that are not in this year's round of grants. But I just want to say thank you to Deal and to everybody at Seattle Public Schools that made this happen in this way this year, and I'm excited about the dollars coming through.
Great. Thank you, Director Hampson. Director Harris.
Director, can I just comment to one
Oh,
thing?
go ahead. Go ahead, Sherry.
One of the comments Director Hampson made is that SPS, I want to just make a shout out to James Bush and Diane DeBacker's teams, who actually and offer up many kind of tutorial sessions in partnership with Deal to support our principals. So I want to make sure to give a call out to that work.
Thank you. Great. And we were really grateful for Chief DeBacker and James Bush. Director Harris.
I echo the thank you, and I'm beyond pleased that we were able to pass this levy, and it makes being a sign depot and standing on street corners waving signs well worth our while, and I was pleased to do it. Two questions. One, we are going to be withholding 25% and acting as the city's banker until audits are done, and thus far, I don't believe we have failed any audits in previous distributions. Is that correct? I guess that would be for Mr. Chappelle.
So can you reiterate your question?
Direct.
Or is Dwayne here? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. I was taking myself off of mute. Hey, Director Harris, I believe that is accurate what you're saying.
Can you introduce yourself, Dwayne?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, President DeWolf. This is Dwayne Chappelle. I'm the Director of Education and Early Learning for the City of Seattle. And Director Harris, to answer your question, I believe your statement is accurate. I'm taking a few notes, and what I'll do just to follow back up with you to make sure. But I do believe that your statement is accurate. But I will follow back up with you and CC all of those around this question. Okay.
Thank you. My next question is, when we met with Deal staff and SPS staff, and I believe Director Hersey was with me when we had our 2x2, we talked about having check-ins every 2 years as opposed to letting this go for 6 years, given our oversight responsibilities. Has this been amended since that date?
Go ahead, Sherry.
But go ahead, Dwayne.
What I was going to say, we did take note of that, and that is on our list to get this figured out, what the timelines and everything, what that would actually look like. But I'll defer over to you, Sherry, to finish that.
Director Harris, I just want to be sure that I understand your question. So this bar is for the full 6 years. In the 2x2s, you had requested it to be for 2 years instead. Is that your question?
No, was to have specific check-ins and reports to the board every 2 years.
Director Harris, can I that you would like for us, Deal and SPS, to come and check in with the board every 2 years to provide an update on where we are with our investments. And that's what I was saying, is that we have that penciled in for us, Deal and SPS. But due to the COVID piece, we just haven't had a chance to follow back up with that. So am I accurately repeating the request?
Dwayne, I think I'm hearing that you have the request rate. Again, this is an introduction item, so I'm hopeful that between these 2 weeks between introduction and action, that there would be an ability to set something easily for us to just have a 2-year conversation or every 2-year conversation.
Okay.
Confirmed. I'll work with Dr. DeBacker's team and as well to coordinate with Deal on what that might look like. Thank you.
Thank you all. Any other questions, Director Harris? I'm assuming mute. Okay, hearing no additional questions from Director Harris, let's go to Director Hersey.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks for the work on this and investments that are coming to our schools. My question was just similar to Director Harris's, and I understand that this is an introduction item. I know that we had a brief conversation about what supports for our buildings would look like in terms of reaching some of these goals through their CSIP process. And I guess my question there is, at what intersection are we able to have the conversation that Director Harris was alluding to, but then also during the meetings that we had during our 2x2, I asked very specifically around what are the supports in place to make sure that we're not ending up in a place to where we have all this money coming through, but it's not necessarily being allocated, or not necessarily allocated, but used in the most effective way to where we have like underspend, blah, 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 blah. I'm just wondering what are the supports, the direct supports from SPS's side that we're providing to principals to make sure that this work moves forward. And that was the end of my question.
Thank you. Director Hersey, I captured your question and I don't have an answer to this right now, but I will get it to you or have it for sure by action.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherry. So just to reiterate, we'll hear back about that on April 7th at that board meeting. Director Mack.
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of the thank yous that have gone out and underscore those, as well as the Director Harris's question around specific 2-year check-ins. I think is an appropriate thing to include in this agreement. And then however that plays out in the actual agreements, however that gets kind of codified into this board action. And as I was reviewing the documentation and noting that the next agenda item is for preschool, which is only for 1 year, not the full plan, I'm wanting to get clarity around what we are actually doing with this board action and what we're not doing, and whether or not the acceptance of the dollars will still be coming through us every year as it does reach well over the typical limit. So this board action lays out the 6-year plan, but I'm curious to know about whether or not next year, when the dollars are being provided, if that's going to be coming back to the board for approval, or if this is the one action that we are taking for this entire 6 year.
Thank you, Director Mack. This is the one action that you will be taking for the 6 years on the K-12 investments. And I can talk more either now or when we get to the preschool one next about why it's coming as a 1 year versus the 6 year.
And I would just say to keep on introduction item 1, if yeah, keep the pertinent.
Yeah, and I'm exactly. I'm happy to talk about and talk about the preschool aspect when we get to that, and keep it just focused here. This was not something that really flagged for me in the 2x2s, but I have a little bit of concern around not having this come to the board every year, because while a plan for 6 years sounds great and these are the expected awards, I would anticipate that there's some sort of there'll be adjustments made or need to be made. I mean, the populations of those schools are going to be changing, the number of students. There's just a lot of changes that happen over 6 years. So I guess I'm a little like happy to approve a plan, but not having that, check-in and approval on the actual dollars coming through in future years leaves me a little concerned.
Thanks, Director Mack. So there will be no changes in the awards as far as the schools go based on demographics changes. And we do know that those will happen based on what happened with the FAL levy. But we did not change the schools, even though the demographics definitely shifted over the course of time. And so we do not anticipate, based on working with Deal, that we would change the schools, even if demographics changed. And that's why we've put forward this as a 6-year proposal.
Does that answer your question, Director Mack?
It does, but I guess I don't, I mean, it answers part of the question. What it doesn't answer is I think maybe this is a Jolynn Berge question, and our policy around approval of funds every year is tied to our annual budget, not a 6-year plan. So I guess I'm not quite understanding why the actual approval of the funds wouldn't be coming each year in future years, based on our current policies around approval of funds and approval of budgets. I'm not sure I understand how this would supersede the need for that annual approval process in the future years from a financial perspective. And additionally, I think the question that Director Harris raised around having specific check-ins, I mean, if there's no mechanism, there's no actual time when it comes back to the board, then there's no function. I guess specifically my question is, are we waiving the future board's annual approval of these dollars? And secondly, what is the check-in process that Director Harris was referencing, be it every 2 years, be it annually, along with the acceptance of the dollars? I think there needs to be something. So
I appreciate that, Director Mack. Just want to be thoughtful that time. It is 1:30. I do think that given that this is intro and it sounds like there's some movement to bring forward some sort of a check-in as part of this, I think we'll be able to see something by April 7th.
Can I just point out that we do have a spot on the oversight committee as a board?
Oh, okay. That's great.
So,
That's great. Okay. So Sherry, do you have all the questions and things that if weren't answered, we can make sure they're back by April 7th?
I have Director Max. I haven't heard from the other two directors yet.
We're still going through. I just want to make sure you got Director Max. Okay, Director Rankin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I switched from my phone to my laptop, so I have to make sure I had continuity. I just echo what my colleagues have said already. And to add on to what Director Mack was asking, in the 2x2 that I was in, we did discuss concerns about 6 years out and what happens if the needs of different communities change. And it was mentioned that there was a possibility that if the need wasn't there anymore at one school based on whatever their priorities were, what they were working on, that there could be the possibility of shifting it. So I would like more, I guess, concrete information or confirmation around that. And I would just also echo with what Director Hampson was saying about concerns that I have about the schools who have received this funding in the past and are not this year, and how we can make sure that they still have what they need to serve their students. I know in particular in my district, John Rogers Elementary is losing their art teacher and some counseling and some other things that have been really critical to their community. So that's another piece that I have concerns around that I hope we can figure out how to address supporting those schools. So but yeah, thank you. I really appreciated the thoughtfulness that has been taken around this, that we heard a lot about in 2x2s, and looking forward to this continued partnership. So thank you. That's it for me.
President DeWolf?
Sure.
Or,
How's it going?
and can I make a comment, or would you like for me just to follow back up in the email? Because I want to follow protocol and make sure that I'm meeting the
I think
timeline.
you're here with us. I mean, if you have a comment back for that, the expectation, again, not only because these are introduction items, but the expectation is that you don't have to necessarily have an answer right this moment, because there could be things you need to find or in between the 2 weeks. But if you have information you'd like to share now.
Okay. Yep. I'll just. Yep. What I'll do is just kind of put this out there. What we shared with Director Rankin wasn't that we, if needs change at a school, that we would change levy investment mid levy terms. What we said was that if there were schools who weren't meeting their expected goals and priorities, we would work with schools to figure out ways to get them to be successful. And then if there became a time where we thought it was best to shift that investment, then we would try to redo like a little competitive process. I just want to make sure that it's clear that we didn't say or even thinking about that if the school's demographics change, that we would shift schools mid-levy. And I'm happy to talk about that more offline. I just want to make sure that was out there.
Understood.
Yeah, no, my understanding from the 2x2 wasn't that, demographic change would trigger an automatic shift in the funding. But what I remember asking was, what happens if a school decides that, if the school determines that whatever supports they were using to pay for aren't needed anymore, then would there be a possibility of other schools accessing that? And I thought that the answer was theoretically yes, but not that a change in demographics would suddenly mean a school would have it pulled, if that makes sense. That was my understanding. So having a firm clarification of that for action would be great.
Thank you, Director Rankin. Director Rivera-Smith.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome. So thank you. Thanks also for all the work that goes into this. It's a big lift, and I appreciate that we got it in before our COVID crisis. So thank goodness for that. And I echo the concerns with the support of schools to apply for these dollars. I trust that that's going to be looked at going forward. Regarding the check-ins that a couple of directors mentioned, I feel, I do see that in the bar there is talk of work groups that are forming that will be, they'll collaborate and support the development and implementation of the levy investments. So that's great. And we do say there is going to be, DEAL has committed to providing an annual investment report to the board. So I see that there is that report already coming. So anything beyond that is appreciated, but it's great to see that we do have that in place here. The only thing I'm looking for maybe some clarification on, maybe, I don't know, just to know who these people are, but I have in my notes that the applications are reviewed by a 23-member community panel, and I would be interested in seeing who those community participants are. And that's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Director Rivera-Smith. Okay. My only question is concerning the investments in our teachers, particularly increasing teachers of color into our educator workforce. About those investments, I can't tell where they are in the document.
I can call out a little bit.
Oh,
but
sure,
Are
sure.
you asking in particular the educator diversity dollars? What exactly are those going to?
Yes, and I say that because, especially, very live, we're getting emails from students just to continue to advocate for more diverse and representative educator workforce. So
Yes, so
Trying to be
in
responsive.
particular, or kind of more specifically, those dollars go towards supporting our Academy of Rising Educators, our Classified to CERT program, our Seattle Teacher Residency program, and our My Brothers Teachers program. And those are spelled out specifically in the letter of intent that is around this particular $563,000 ask for the school year 2021.
Yep.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That was great.
Yeah. And
Okay,
in each of
so-
those, in each of Director DeWolf and other directors, in each of those LOIs, it's letter of intent. It spells out more specifics about the investments for the upcoming school year.
Thank you. Yep, and those are all part of the package of documents. It is 1:37. We still have 10 items, so I just want to encourage directors, if a director's already made a point, I know Sherry and our team are taking that down for the action, so just to be mindful of our time, because I want to make sure SPS TV is back on at 3 o'clock for our family and our community. So just want to be thoughtful. So I'm going to move to introduction item number 2, which is approval of families education, preschool and promise, PEP, levy funding for preschool services for 2020-2021 school year. Ms. Cox, I believe you will also be presenting again here. So I'll ask you to take it away.
Thank you, Director DeWolf. The same round of thank yous go out regarding this award as well. This is in particular the $7,300,000 award for preschool programming in Seattle Public Schools. When the teams were working together to determine this award, there was alignment around our strategic plan, in particular the superintendent goal around the P3 planning pathways, as well as utilizing the data from our 13 priority schools. So this continues the current programming with some additional classrooms, as well as some conversions to better serve our students with special education needs. So I'll just highlight that the new or the changes are that at John Muir Elementary, we're going to add a new full day Head Start classroom. And that is one of our 13 schools. And then our part day to a full day Head Start at West Seattle Elementary, which is also one of our 13 schools. We're going to SPP Plus, and we're going to convert a Head Start to a Head Start Plus classroom. And then at Olympic Hills Elementary, we're going to convert an SPP to an SPP Plus, as well as convert a Head Start to a Head Start Plus program. And those schools are all in the 13 priority schools that we've listed due to the number of African-American boys in grades K-3 at those schools. I will leave it at that and am ready to take questions on the preschool portion.
Thank you, Sherry. All right, I'm going to start with Director Hampson. We'll just go down the line again for questions, comments, and concerns from our directors. Okay, so Director Hampson.
My only question here is if there's an update on the payment for special education students from our 2x2s. There were still some details being figured out when we met.
My understanding, Director Hampson, is that we've reached full agreement to support the changes that I just laid out for you all. So I think we've reached agreement on those services.
Okay, thank you. Director Harris?
Huge thank you for increased focus on SPP Plus and Head Start Plus inclusion programs. Still would love to see a goal, because I think with goals you have something to aim for. Had this conversation a lot. I do have a question though about Seattle preschool programs that are not in SPS facilities. Are those manned or staffed by folks under collective bargaining agreements that came up recently in COVID-19 citing issues?
Director Harris, my understanding is that the SPP classrooms that are operated by our community-based organizations are not part of a bargaining agreement.
Mr. Chappelle?
Yes, Director Harris. I feel so. I'll follow back up with you on that, because I want to just make sure that is 100% accurate. But I am leaning towards what Sherry, in agreement with what Sherry said. But let me just I'll circle back with you on that just to make sure I can be specific with you. Okay.
Could that be to the whole board, not just myself, please, sir?
Absolutely. This will be to the whole board. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Director Harris. Okay, Director Hersey.
No questions for me at this time.
Thank you, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
Yes, thank you. Apologies for the delay and unmuting. So this is just for the acceptance of the next year. And I was reading through and see that it lays out what the dollars are actually being spent for, but the change and the expansion of the program leaves a couple questions for me from both the number of seats available as well as capacity management of our whole buildings. So the first question that I have, which may be a little technical, but in hearing that we're converting a developmental preschool classroom to an SPP Plus classroom, my understanding is that SPP Plus classrooms only provide, 4 slots for students with disabilities out of the number. So I'm kind of curious to know what is there going to be maintained in this transition from a developmental preschool to a SPP Plus, the number of spaces available for students that need it? Are we reducing the number of developmental / special education slots in preschool, or are we expanding it? I guess I'll pause there. My other one is around the planning for physical capacity. But Ms. Cox, do you know, or maybe Ms. Toner's on the line, she might know.
I don't have the number off the top of my head, Director Mack, but I will get that number and provide the board with that information. I believe your question is, are we maintaining the same number of seats for students who have special education needs in this transition?
Yes, I think that's probably a good way to boil it down, knowing that developmental preschool is a shorter day, and specifically for students that are identified as needing developmental preschool. provide special education services for those students. But my concern of the transition in this process is from, if we're converting a developmental preschool, are we ensuring that we are still going to be providing the same or more slots for special education services in our preschools that are needed for that to serve the students? So yes, I think your way of boiling it down is probably a little more simple than I'm explaining it. So thank you for coming back to the full board with a
And
more detail on that.
Yep, we'll get you a chart of the numbers.
That sounds great. And then
You had an additional question?
my other question is about the capacity management of our buildings and the provision of preschool classrooms in our buildings, which they require a separate playground space, and the codes have substantially different than our regular classrooms, which is something we have to plan for. And also, if we convert a K-5 classroom to a preschool classroom, then it reduces the capacity of the building for K-5 classrooms. So I do appreciate from a planning perspective that we're just looking at this 1 year out. But I know that we're planning on expanding over time, and I'm wondering what the current thinking is. Have we identified where those additional preschool classrooms might be over the course of the next 6 years and the implementation of the levy? Do we have some tentative draft ideas at this point, or is that all still TBD because we really need to filter that through our capacity management processes, and including the new advisory committee that's spinning up?
My understanding is that the team of Cachelle's team in early learning with Heather Brown and Fred's team have been working together on some draft planning for the capacity management side, but that there is nothing final at this time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Director Rankin.
Yes, hi, sorry. I was couldn't find the right window. I was looking at the item. I have, well, okay. I would like for every SPP location to be accessible and available to any student with or without disabilities, and for staffing to follow student need. I would also like that to be the case in Seattle Public Schools. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there because when we figure out how we're going to staff sites first, it decenters the needs of the actual students that we're trying to serve and how we're trying to serve them. I have wonderings about students with disabilities, who decides or helps families determine if SPP Plus is the best spot for their child with disabilities, if developmental preschool is the best place. And then what happens, as was in the case of my own child in one of the pilot classrooms of SPP Plus, what happens if you discover that a child has a disability, or that a disability emerges that needs to be addressed. So I guess this isn't really a question right now because I don't know that there is an answer, but I would just ask that we all think about going forward how we are determining how many, that there are a number of slots and that we staff based on that number of slots, instead of us assessing what the need is in our communities and for our families, and then staff according to the reality in front of us. I know that's more complicated because of the way that funding works and patching together different streams. But that is honestly that is something that I can't let myself not state. So that's it for me for now.
Thank you, Director Rankin.
Thank you, Director Rankin. I think the only thing I can, I hear you. And the other thing I guess I'd like to add is that when you ask the question about who helps families determine which programming is best, that is part of the IEP team's decision making. Now that would require a student to have an IEP team. So as far as the emerging disabilities, that's a different question that I don't have an answer to at this time. And our goal is to continue to work with the city to get funds to move to more and more inclusion classrooms.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Rivera-Smith.
Hi, yeah. I'll just like to echo off Sherry there. Yeah, I know that our early learning department does have a goal of adding 3 to 4 classrooms a year. So we appreciate the city working with us to strengthen that commitment to us, help us plan for those full day inclusion preschools that we'd like to achieve. Otherwise, I have no other questions that haven't already been asked by other board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rivera-Smith. I don't have any questions this time, but just want to really reiterate our not only the gratitude to the voters for supporting the levy, the FEP levy, but also gratitude to the city for being really great partners in this work, and knowing that because of our great partnership over the last couple of years, that certainly needing that strong relationship now as we go through the coronavirus as it's hitting our community. So super grateful to you for all the work you've done to put this together and to bring this before the board. So,
thank you, directors.
We will now move to introduction item number 3. We're at 152. We have 8 additional. We have 8 items left to go. So the item number 3 is resolution 2019/20-28, affirming inclusion of our LGBTQIA student, staff, and community. And want to just do a little bit of clarification here. Some of the items that come before the board between now and the end of the closure, the governor's order, because of last night's order and work coming before the board needing to be necessary and routine, some of our items will still be coming before the full board, but we won't make a vote on them, but they will be introduced in the timeline that we've set on our committee work calendar. So this item, for example, we'll introduce today, and we may not vote on it until May 6th. I think it's the date of the first board meeting that would be outside of the current governor's closure directive. So just want to set a little bit of expectation and context around this item. You'll see it today, but we may not see it again until after the closure, just so that we're making sure to focus on necessary and routine work, or work that pertains to the response to the coronavirus. So this is a resolution that I've developed over the last few months, working with groups such as Inclusive Washington. Again, was really grateful to have met with the Meany Middle School ASB, who, when I spent the afternoon with them, one of the first things they said is, and it wasn't an LGBTQ class, it was obviously an ASB class, and so one of the very first thing that they said they want in their schools, in their middle school, is LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. So much of the work of Inclusive Washington, Meany Middle School ASB, as well as groups and organizations and leaders across the city from so just want to share my gratitude for not only Inclusive Washington and Meany Middle School ASB, but also Greater Seattle Business Association, SOMA Seattle, WISN, Pride Foundation, Equal Rights Washington, NAACP, LGBTQ, Gender Justice League, GLSEN, Gender Diversity, LGBTQ Allyship, Ingersoll Gender Center, Gay City, and Washington LGBTQ Commission, as well as the NAACP Youth Council, who are currently reviewing this as well. So grateful to all the folks who have given feedback, insights, and put your time and energy into advocating for LGBTQ inclusion in our schools. That was a process that I've been working to develop this resolution. Imagine all of the things that have happened since November, and obviously coronavirus being one of like I said, we've been working on this over and over again since November, and this is the product we're sharing today. I don't necessarily want to read through the whole resolution because it's 2 o'clock, but if you notice in the resolution, really trying to illustrate that we've done a ton of work at the district to support our LGBTQ students. There's tons of research that suggests inclusive schools increase academic performance as well as feelings of safety in our schools. And then lays out some therefore be it resolved. And I think the highlights from the resolution are the superintendent will direct the facilities assessment be completed and provided to the board, which details which schools could be converted to either a single stall or multi-stall gender neutral restroom. So basically a feasibility assessment study, as well as committing the district to making sure that we have at least one accessible multi-stall gender neutral restroom in all new facilities construction taking place between when the vote happens and moving forward. In addition, it also requires that newly adopted United States history, social studies, and English language arts instructional materials, and reasonably include in all other instructional materials, explicitly incorporate significant events, societal contributions, and or representations of LGBTQIA+ individuals. So those are some of the highlights. As you can see in the documents, I have the bar and the resolution and then the racial equity analysis. So it is, I'm going to go through the directors by alphabetical order and answer any questions. So Director Hampson.
I don't believe I have any questions at this time. I look forward to, I appreciate the thoroughness of this and that it also ties directly to future changes in policy. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Director Hampson. Director Harris.
Again, many and profound thanks to you and to all of the groups that you've been working with. From a policy standpoint, I think you need an additional director on the resolution, and I think most of your colleagues would be more than honored to sign on.
Oh, okay. That's great feedback. Thank you. Director Hersey.
Excited for this. Don't have any questions at this time. Great work.
Thank you, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
No, thank you. No question or comments at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Mack. Director Rankin.
Hi, I do not have questions or comments. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and through thread of this, kind of weaving it into our values as a district and ensuring that these stories are told and have representation through our curriculum is awesome. And I'm just appreciative of President DeWolf's work and the folks who supported it. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Rankin. And to clarify, there are 3 policies that this is so far tied to, but there might be more. There's 3211, which is coming before CNI. 2015 is coming back in June to CNI, as well as 6900, and that is coming through ops in April. So those are on their own tracks, but those are the ones we look forward to that correspond to this resolution or have a connection to this resolution. Okay, Director Vera Smith.
No real questions, but definitely deep appreciation for the work gone into this. I'm excited. It's still kind of sad we won't vote on it for a while, but I'm and look forward to seeing this.
Thanks, Director Vera Smith. And obviously, I don't have any questions or comments for myself, so I'm going to keep us moving right along. Thank you, everybody, for your gratitude. But again, want to make sure that if anybody is taking some gratitude, it's Inclusive Washington, Meany Middle School ASB, and all the countless organizations that helped me, as well as Ronald Boy at SPS, Lisa Love at SPS, and Chief Debacker and Chief Podesta, as well as Director Smith and Rankin. So thank you, everybody. So I'm going to move us to item number 4. It sounds like somebody might be vacuuming potentially. So we will now move to introduction item number 4, Memorandum of Understanding with Seattle Education Association regarding Teacher Principal Evaluation Program, otherwise known as TPEP. So Chief Human Resources Officer, Dr. Clover Codd, I believe you will be briefing us.
That is correct. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay. All right. So just for way of background, in the spring of 2019, the legislature did make changes to RCW 28A 405.100, which is the law that governs the teacher and principal evaluation process known as TPEP. Those changes are outlined in a memo that was attached to this board action report. Specifically, with respect to this board action, we are asking to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Seattle Education Association to change one provision of our collective bargaining agreement that will now align with the RCW. That change last spring made it so that comprehensive mandated every 6 years for teachers on continuing contracts in proficient status or above, as opposed to every 4 years. Now, this law does not preclude or change any provision in the collective bargaining agreement that allows a principal from moving any teacher at any time during a school year up through December to a comprehensive cycle from a focus cycle. So just in case you don't know, a comprehensive cycle means that a teacher is being evaluated on all 8 evaluative criteria in a given year, whereas a focused evaluation cycle allows for the evaluator and the teacher to mutually agree upon one criteria to be evaluated on. So in any given year, all teachers still receive a summative evaluation. This MOU would change the provision in the CBA requiring when the comprehensive cycle is mandated. I'll open it up with questions.
Thank you, Clover. I'm going to run through our list alphabetically. So Director Hampson, I'll let you take it away first with any comments, questions, or concerns.
None at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hampson. Director Harris.
Question for Dr. Codd, if I could. What would all 8 criteria, if a principal wanted to evaluate, would that be someone that is not, what's the word I want to say, shining, for lack of a better word?
So thanks for that question, Director Harris. So a principal or a teacher could always ask to be on a comprehensive evaluation cycle. So it's not necessarily only because they're not fully proficient. Now, a principal can always move a teacher who they have concerns about from a focus cycle to a comprehensive cycle. Sometimes that will also happen if a teacher changes grade. So it's not necessarily tied to performance.
And do teachers actually ask for this comprehensive evaluation as opposed to principals?
You know, I don't know. That would be anecdotal information. I don't have that information readily available.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Harris. Director Hersey.
No questions for me at this time. Just a quick comment. As a teacher who is proudly now on focused as opposed to comprehensive, I have never heard of somebody asking to go back to comprehensive, if that gives you any clarity, Director Harris.
Help.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
So appreciate this coming before us, and I understand that it's an MOU that adjusts the collective bargaining agreement and that it requires board approval. I'm curious to know what the threshold of that is for MOUs
So
coming
if
before the board, and why perhaps there might be other MOUs that would be agreed upon without coming before the board.
So in general, if an MOU is changing a provision that is outlined in the collective bargaining, come forward to the board for approval. Or if the MOU would have a financial impact of anything above the $250,000 threshold, it would also come to the board for board approval. If it's an MOU that is essentially clarifying expectations or clarifying something that's already outlined in the collective bargaining agreement, it would not come to the board for approval because no changes to the CBA would be made.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Zach, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Oh, that was me. Director Rankin. Thank you, Dr. Claude.
No, I do not have further questions. I appreciate hearing from the union educator on our board about the preference that teachers have. So thank you, Director Hersey.
Yeah, that's a nice.
Live to serve.
That voice.
I know it.
Thank you, Director Rankin. Director Rivera-Smith. Director Rivera-Smith.
I said no, sorry, no questions right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Rivera-Smith. And I have no questions this time, but thank you, Dr. Codd, for all of your work on this. And just to echo Director Rankin and to really elevate Director Hersey, I am grateful to have that voice and that perspective here today in this conversation.
Okay, thank you.
So thanks, Dr. Codd. Okay, so now we'll move to introduction item number 5. This is BTA 4, replacement of non-functional audio-visual equipment in schools and addition of AV equipment in new schools and capacity classrooms. Chief Financial Officer Jolynn Berge, I believe you will be briefing us.
Hello, good afternoon. This bar is to approve the purchase order for AV equipment for our new classrooms that open in school year 2021, along with any break fix, that's an IT term for broken equipment, that would be needed to be replaced through the 21-22 school year. On page 19 of the technology plan, which can be found on the Department of Technology Services external website on the left-hand side, that plan outlines the budget for technology for years 18 through 23. So on page 19 of that plan, this is included in the planned expenditure. It's under the Student Learning and Support Systems section, under the row titled Class Budget from BTA $4 of $2,934,000. This bar is for $1.1 million of that. Additionally, tech plan on pages 38 and 39, there's a section titled Classroom Audio Visual, which outlines what each new classroom receives, as well as providing a diagram of the configuration, and it provides additional details as well. That would conclude my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Dr. Hampson, any comments, questions, or concerns?
No, just a comment. This is one that we would have looked at in audit and finance, but didn't, but went ahead and pushed up for intro because of the coronavirus and cancellation of that meeting. So that said, I know that this is a tremendous need in our buildings. Anyone that's spent any time in our classrooms knows how dependent our teachers are on this technology every day, and so I know it's greatly needed. So,
thank you, Director Ham. Director Harris.
I am in favor of this expenditure, and I am also in favor of us figuring out a way to take the technology plan, which has not been embedded in policy, and figure out a way that we take a look at it, have a work session, and put it into policy, since we're using it as a basis for some pretty impressive numbers and very needed expenditures. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Harris. Director Hersey.
No questions for me at this time.
Thank you, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
I'll just underscore and agree with Director Harris's statement around the planning aspect, and we need to continue to move forward. We definitely need to continue to make strides, especially now, to provide technology to students and to be able to learn more effectively remotely. And so definitely support this action, as well as additional actions that may be taken to support students around technology.
Thank you, Director Mack. Director Rankin.
Hi. I don't have specific questions. I wanted to tag on to what Directors Mack and Harris brought up about the need for planning technology, and just add that it is my desire that with that planning, that teaching and learning is driving that, that we are planning for and engaging with technology in a way that is being driven by what we want in terms of teaching and learning for our educators and for our students, and that it's not the other way around, that we're not planning technology spending and implementation and then figuring out how to teach with it later. I think, it'd be really easy to order up thousands of whatever kind of equipment there might be, but if we are not thinking about it and having it being driven by what we want education to be, and making sure that our educators are supported in using it effectively, the technology by itself is not super useful. So I'm seeing this as a crossover kind of between curriculum instruction and operations in terms of what a plan could look like. I just want to make sure that we're not losing sight of the fact that it should be tied to teaching and learning. So thanks.
It sounds like we have room for a very meaningful and robust discussion. Thank you, Director Rankin. Director Vera-Smith.
Hi, thanks. I was looking, so I see in the bar that the district will stock these parts so that when schools create a work order for repair or replacements, that can happen. So therefore, the onus is on the schools to access this to make those work orders. I want to make sure that we have a plan to communicate. We have this available now, because we want to make sure that the schools know that this will be available to them so that they can put those work orders in. I think a lot of teachers get used to working with the dysfunctioning things they have, and they don't think to come back and ask for good pieces. It's good equipment, so I want to make sure that they know to do that now. And I'm also thinking about something no one else probably cares about, but what happens to the parts we're getting rid of? Is the contractor going to recycle them? Where do they go from there? Just want to always be thinking about, whenever we're throwing something out, where it's going, what we're doing with that. That's all.
Thank you. Chief Berge, do you know if there's a plan for that, or if at least by the 7th we could have an answer?
About the recycling of parts?
Yeah, it's just what's their process? Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. And the TSSs, so the technology support specialist in each building, the teacher communicates with that staff person in each building. That's how the work orders get done. It's a very familiar process. So if they have a laptop issue or technology issue in the classroom, the TSS enters the work order and gets that taken care of.
Thank you, Chief Berge. And I have no questions at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so next item is item number 6. This is BEX. We'll now move to introduction item number 6, which is BEX 4, final acceptance of contract P5124 with EM Tech LLC for the View Ridge Seismic Improvement Project. This came through the Ops Committee on March 2nd for approval. Chief Operations Officer Fred Podesta, I believe you'll be briefing us.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, President DeWolf. And as you noted with this item and the remaining items on the agenda, unlike some of the previous ones, all these actions were heard by the Operations Committee because the scheduling permitted that. Agenda item 6 is a final acceptance of a construction contract that provided seismic improvements to View Ridge Elementary School. This work was completed in the summer of 2019. The contracts were awarded in the spring, and structural improvements were made to the school, and the work was accepted by both district staff and our consultant at completion in August of 2019. And this allows the contract, accepts the contract and allows the contractor to release their performance bond. And that's concludes my introduction, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Okay, thanks, Chief Podesta. All right, I'm going to start again down the line. So, Director Hampson, do you have any comments, questions, or concerns for Chief Podesta in item number 6?
None for me, thank you.
Thank you, Director Hampson. Director Harris.
None for me, but congratulations. These are always times to celebrate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Harris. They definitely are. Director Hersey.
None for me at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
No questions, just a comment, and I think on all of the rest of these two. Massive thank you for everyone coming together for ops and having these discussions. These were all reviewed, discussed, and move forward as they're stated. So thank you very much for the work, and cheers.
Thank you, Director Mack. And just for the public, Director Mack is the chair of the Operations Committee, and so thank you for all of your work. I know that y'all have been working a little bit double time, even adding more meetings than normal. So really grateful for your work, and thank you, obviously, to Chief Podesta for your work. Director Rankin.
I'll just echo what's been said. This is exciting, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness and thoroughness of circling back to, make sure that we've done the things we committed to voters with in these levies, and that, student safety and making sure things are all, buttoned up and done is awesome. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Director Rankin. Director Rivera-Smith.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Rivera-Smith. Chief Podesta, I only have one question. Again, just for the public, is there a place where folks can go to see progress and or what projects we're working on are doing, or how the levies, kind of the progress on the levy? I think to some of the comments from directors for this item, certainly people I think are interested or want to celebrate the great work we've done, or see if their school maybe has recently had work done, or if there's something coming down the line. Is there a place on our website where people can, that you would maybe direct people to, where they can get a snapshot? Or
there is. I believe it's fairly easy to navigate. I don't have the link in mind, but we have project-specific websites that for major projects that describe the body of work associated with our levies, and folks can look at photos and progress reports as projects progress. And I think if people look in the capital projects and planning part of the district's website, they can find those project updates.
Awesome.
I actually just sent that to if people Google BEX or BTA SPS, it should come up with a whole page on our website where you can click on the individual levies and what projects are still in process, and it's a lot of information, actually.
That's great. Thank you so much, Director Rankin. Okay, we will now move to introduction item number 7. This is the elevator maintenance and repair master state contract. This came through ops on March 12th for consideration. So Mr. Podesta, I believe you'll be presenting again.
Yes, elevators being much used and complex and specialized mechanical devices. The district always maintains a maintenance contract with specialized service providers that can provide planned and unplanned maintenance and repairs on elevators, which are also subject to state regulation and inspected annually. The district has a practice of using state contracts, which are awarded across the state, and a roster is developed for each county in the state. And staff reviewed the roster for King County and selected LTEC, which had the most favorable pricing and also had experience with our specific buildings and equipment. That concludes my remarks, and I'll take any questions the directors have.
Thanks, Chief Podesta. All right, starting with Director Hampson. Hearing none, let's move to Director Harris.
No questions at this time.
Thanks, Director Harris. Director Hersey.
Second verse, same as the first. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
Just a thank you, no questions.
Thanks, Director Mack. Director Rankin.
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Rankin. Director Rivera-Smith.
Hi, thanks. So looking back from the ops meeting, we talked about the roster, Chief Podesta, that's used for these contractors, and you said that because we were inquiring about the equity considerations and who those contractors were, and you said you would check to see if equity was considered in the building of that. Were you able to do that?
Yes, we actually revised the board action report to look into the state process to see what kind of outreach and consideration were made, mostly for small business, and added that information to the board action report.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I have no further questions. Oh, and actually, Director Hampson, do you have a question? I know that you might have been.
No, sorry about that.
Muted.
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have none at this time as well, Chief Podesta. So thank you. We'll now move to introduction item number 8, which is BTA 5 Building Condition Assessment Award Contract number K1379 to perform building condition assessment services. This came through ops on the Operations Committee on March 12th for approval. Mr. Podesta, I know you'll be presenting again.
Yes, as part of planning our capital program and for levy planning, we typically contract with consultants to review all our facilities that are in scope, which are usually older buildings not just recently reconstructed, and to check the condition of the structure and also building systems to help us prioritize which facilities need the most attention in our future capital work. There's also a requirement to get funding from the state with the school construction assistance program to have a certified condition assessment done every 6 years. We have one due in 2020. This contract would allow us to begin that condition assessment. And that concludes my introduction, and I'd be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, so for introduction item number 8, we'll start with questions, comments, and concerns from Director Hampson. Director Hampson, take it away.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Director Harris.
Question for Chief Operations Podesta. Is this the Meng folks, or is this another one of those evaluations? Because I don't recognize the name of the proposed contractor.
This is a different firm. The staff that worked for Meng at the time that we did a previous assessment that you may be familiar with, Director Harris, have actually joined this firm. Meng did bid. This was awarded in a competitive process. There were multiple bidders, including Meng and others, but this was deemed the most favorable bid, and the key personnel working on the assessment have worked on Seattle Public Schools assessments in the past.
So here's my question then. Do they have any kind of a non-compete, or can they build upon the foundation of what Meng has done in the past?
They're welcome to use the deliverables that are the property of the district in the past. And then, of course, the staff are not constrained with whatever personal experience they have.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Harris. Director Hersey.
None from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
Yeah, this was discussed in ops, and I also wanted to help make the point that this contract starts one of the very key components to our facilities master planning that's required for the next levy, and just a really important part of that process, and grateful that we are continuing to move forward on these planning pieces that need to keep going, even in light of the emergency that we're in. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Mack. Director Rankin.
I'm good.
Thanks, Director Lincoln. Director Bear-Smith.
Just want to echo off of Director Mack and how it's great to see these go forward. I do remember that it was also noted that potentially some of this work could start while schools are empty because of the kids all being out of them right now. So it'd be pretty awesome to have that one tiny benefit to being in schools right now. But Chief Podesta, is that something that is still a possibility?
It is. We're discussing with our staff and consultants, given the governor's order about essential functions, to make sure we're in compliance with that, and making sure that we're maintaining safe workplaces for everyone. Some of this work does entail people getting into crawl spaces and getting into tight areas. So, but we are trying to look for ways to keep this work going.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Director Bear-Smith. And Chief Podesta, I don't have any questions for you at this time for item number 8. Okay, so we'll now move to introduction item number 9. Contract P5128, bid number B11923 to Olympic Peninsula Construction Inc. for the relocate and set up portable classrooms at multiple school sites project. This came to the Operations Committee on March 12th for consideration. So, Mr. Podesta, take it away.
We are getting contracts lined up for whatever capacity work we need this coming summer. This work is aligned with our capacity management plan that the board approved in January of this year. And these will be contractors that can move multiple portables. The actual location and setup will be finalized, closer to the start of school in terms of, what enrollment and capacity trends are in place. But we award the contracts now to get contractors on board and start doing the planning work. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions directors have.
Okay. Thanks, Chief Podesta. Okay, we'll start down the line. Director Hampson.
So not necessarily directly related, so don't feel the need to spend too much time in response. But one of the things that this contract brings to mind for me is since we're talking about moving and relocating, setting up, when we do things like relocation, for example, what would a company like this provide in terms of environmental assurances that something that might have any kind of toxic. I know most of it is probably off gas by the time something gets moved, but I think that is one of the bigger concerns our communities have around portables is when we're doing something like moving it, you could be disturbing things. Do companies like this provide you with environmental assurances?
They do at some, with regard to some site-specific work. I think the condition of the businesses, the condition of the structures ourselves in some cases are the district's responsibility, and we may work with other consultants. I think that would not necessarily be completely in scope of this inside the actual structure, as much of whatever facility or site prep needs to be done at a place where these things are moved. And I will make a note of this question and see if we have any more information to add when action is taken on this item. But it's certainly part of it certainly is part of the project consideration. I'm not sure it's fully in the scope of this contract.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Director Harris.
Only that I want to be part of the crew at some point to see how it all works in the middle of the night.
We'll set a date.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hersey.
None from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
Yes, thank you. When we push something forward for consideration instead of approval, there's always a reason for doing so. And I just was looking at my notes as to what that reason was. And what I wrote down was that there's to be a reference to the capacity. And I don't know whether or not that's included. I don't see this as a red line, so I can't tell whether or not more daylight into the capacity implications. I think the attachment of the capacity management board action that was approved provides a fair amount of that information to complete the question. But I think one of my questions is how aligned is the estimation to what was estimated back in December? Meaning, do we have the same number of portables and the same locations that are expected to be moved, or this plan and this dollar amount potentially changing between now and fall?
My understanding is the pricing was a bit more favorable than the. Well, I'll take your first question first. There was language added to the bar that directly references the capacity management plan. I think the pricing we got was a bit more favorable than the estimates that were provided in that project, and would allow for the amount of moving the number of structures that were anticipated in that project. What we have seen in past history is the number of portables does not affect the cost nearly as much as site-specific conditions at a building site. So if there were changes, it's exactly where you're going to put them, and do you have to do more site work than you expected. So there is a possibility for changes. The capacity management report was kind of open-ended and made an estimate of how many portables we might have to move, but it's not specific on where. So that's probably the biggest variable, but came in well in terms of what from the contractor. Final pricing we'll know when we know what the exact specific sites and the circumstances at the buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Podesta. I also want to just point out for the record that I believe the number was across the district. We have something, and correct me if this is wrong, but I believe 289 portables across the district, which, you know, if a typical class at school building is maybe 30 classrooms, we have 5-6 buildings full in portables currently. Just wanted to make that point. Thank you very much.
Director Rankin.
No questions.
Thank you, Director Rankin. Director Rivera-Smith.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any questions as well. Thank you, Chief Podesta. We'll move on to introduction item number 10, which is the BEX 5 award contract P1710 for construction project management services to Parametrics for the Rainier Beach High School replacement project. This came through the Operations Committee on March 12th for approval. Mr. Podesta, this is yours again.
Yes, for large, complex construction projects, the district has a practice of hiring construction management firms to help us with the size and scope and the number of subcontractors and others that will be involved in a project. This work was competitively bid and is particularly since everyone is interested in a accelerated schedule and managing the sites at Rainier Beach, since we're going to perform construction and keep the school in place. There's a lot of complexity, and so we're hoping to get the construction management firm on board as quickly as possible and really dive into the details of the construction and demolition and construction schedules for Rainier Beach High School. And happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Chief Podesta. All right, we'll start with Director Hampson. Is there any comments, questions, or concerns?
Let's do this. Thank you very much. None further.
Thank you, Director Harris.
I hope that we can move forward on this with all due speed. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Harris. Director Hersey.
Retweet. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Hersey. Director Mack.
Yes, thank you. I just want to actually acknowledge the public comment that we've been getting in emails regarding the need for continuing to do the planning work and move forward on projects like this. So grateful that we are doing so. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Mack. Director Rankin.
I'm excited. That's it.
Thank you. Director Rivera-Smith.
Ditto. Can't wait to see this get done. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Podesta, I do have a couple questions. My main question is about how does the impact of COVID-19, how is that impacting projects, summer planning projects? Is this project going to be impacted, changed, altered? Is the timeline going to be revised because of the school closures and coronavirus?
You know, we've been advised by OSPI that none of the legal orders work should affect the timelines for our construction projects. We're working with all our vendors and contractors, to assess their impacts. Sometimes people are flying in from other parts of the country. People build teams, so it's likely that there will be some effect. Some of those things are largely manageable, but we're kind of still assessing. There is still a lot of uncertainty, about how construction will be affected and, our summer timeline. But we are looking for ways to continue work as best as possible while keeping our staff and others safe, and particularly at job sites where social distancing is maybe a little bit more difficult. Other types of work, design and consulting, might be easier for people to work remotely and so there will be some impact. It's hard to know what it is, but we are trying to keep, our schedules are so driven around being able to accomplish things in the summer. We are looking for ways to continue as best we can.
Understood. Thank you. And do you have a good spot for people to go to if they'd like to keep checked in or kind of up to date on Rainier Beach High School Replacement Project updates?
I believe we have created a project website. I shouldn't swear to that. And I will double check, make sure by the time this comes for action to see what we can advise people. I don't think we have updates to the minute if we're having to revise schedules. People are working because of our current public health situation. But I think we have kind of the general lay of the land on these projects, and people can see our baseline schedules.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 11. This is Distress School Grant, X4 Program Contingency, Approval of Construction Contract P5134 for bid number B11925 to CBK Construction Services, Inc., and the use of X4 Program Contingency Funds for the Magnolia Elementary School Addition Project. This came through Operations Committee on March 12th for approval. Mr. Podesta, take it away.
This is a construction contract for our prime contractor with regard to a school addition at Magnolia Elementary School. This work is a 6 classroom expansion, and we're using some transfer funds of $2 million, as the bar says, from Bex4 from contingency there. The project was competitively bid, and this is something we're hoping to get started. I'll take any questions.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep, Director Hanson.
No questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Harris.
None from me, thank you.
Thanks, Director Harris. Director Hersey.
None for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Mack.
I just think I want to make the additional point that this second part of this project was master planned into it. Even though the opening of Magnolia happened last year, the second phase was expected to be done now, and grateful that it's continuing forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Rankin.
Nope.
Thank you. Director Rivera-Smith.
None for me, thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Podesta, I also do not have any additional questions at this time, so thank you for joining us. We do have a couple more minutes before we adjourn, and I just wanted to spend a couple of seconds to just say a really big thank you and express supreme gratitude to SPS leadership and staff. I know that in the span of a week, obviously when the coronavirus became too big to ignore and we felt a moral imperative to close our schools, SPS got right to work, and I know that I, particularly at the Vantage Point behalf of the board, have been really just honored and grateful for the work that the district has put in the last week. Over the last week, we've opened 26 breakfast and lunch meal sites where we're also distributing educational packets for students across the city. We've launched a school bus food and educational materials delivery. We've served more than 50 information on our website about mental health providers who are working in partnership with the district to provide mental health supports, crisis care, and telehealth counseling. Today we opened 3 child care centers. Tomorrow we're going to open 6, and by the end of the week there will be an additional 1, and we're hoping to continue to open up more child care sites based on public health guidance and working with OSPI. In addition, we've also created K through 5 educational programming for SPS TV, YouTube, and also our partnership at Como TV, who are doing rebroadcasts. And mostly to say that all these are huge undertakings to do in a week, creating a whole new system. So I'm really, really grateful for the work that's been put in. I know we're going to have some news soon about negotiations from our teachers union, but really, really grateful for all the work that you've done. I know that it's definitely an interesting time, and it's so hard to parse through all the information that's coming at families. But if you visit seattleschools.org, scroll down to the page that says coronavirus update, click on that link. Once you're there are tons of pieces of information under the box that says resources, and you'll find everything there from meal sites, childcare, mental health services, learning resources, SPS TV, even ways that potentially people that need some internet access have some options there. So just really grateful for the amount of information that's coming out of the district. And also want to make one last bit of gratitude to my fellow board directors. Over the last week and a half, we've been in an experience we never thought we would be in. But I'm really grateful for all of you for stepping up, continuing to listen to community, bring those voices and perspectives to the district, and work together to make sure that we are supporting our families and supporting our students at home during this unprecedented time. I thank you all for your work, all for your flexibility, even making sure we can get on a call at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday, all by telephone. I know that your advocacy and your personal efforts, and even those from our community members for pitching in, is so humbling. And so I believe we're all, thank you all for all of your work. I am going to stand at 2:46 p.m. There being no further business to come before this board. This regular board meeting is now adjourned at 2:46 p.m. And thank you, directors, for being flexible, and thank you to the staff for also being flexible. And we'll see you on the next call.
Thanks.
Thank
Night.
you. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night or good afternoon.